I don't need permission to spend time with my friends, she said, her tone sharp, defiant, like she was daring me to argue. I didn't. I just looked at her, calm, steady, unmoved. She waited for me to respond, expecting the same routine, the tension, the debate, the reassurance that always ended with her getting her way. Instead, I smiled faintly and said, "You're absolutely right. You don't need permission for anything anymore." The words left my mouth quietly, but they landed like a door slamming shut. Her eyes flickered, confused. She thought I was being sarcastic. I wasn't. That was the moment something shifted, not in the air, in me. She had planned that argument. I could tell. She'd been rehearsing it in her head all day, waiting for the right spark to set it off. She wanted drama. The raised voices, the emotional high. But I didn't give her that. I just gave her silence. The kind that doesn't end when the conversation does. That night, she went out with her friends. Her laughter echoed from the driveway as I watched her get into the Uber. She was dressed for attention, not comfort, that deliberate kind of effort that says, "I need to be seen." She didn't look back once. I stayed home, made myself a drink, sat on the couch with the TV muted. The quiet wasn't peaceful yet, but it was getting there. I scrolled through my phone, not to check on her. I'd stopped doing that, but to remind myself how many parts of my life had shrunk around her moods. Every weekend had become hers. Every decision weighed against her reactions. That stopped tonight. Around midnight, she texted, "Don't wait up." I didn't. I went to bed, woke up early, made black coffee in my old Keurig, and drove to the beach. The world felt bigger that morning. When she came home the next afternoon, her energy was different. She walked in loud, overcompensating, telling stories about how much fun they'd had. I nodded, said nothing. She hesitated, that brief flicker of uncertainty when someone realizes their audience has changed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, lit only by the glow of my laptop screen. She lingered near the door and said, "We good?" I looked up, met her eyes, and said, "Better than ever." She didn't know it yet, but that was the last time she'd ever hear me say those words. Because while she was celebrating her freedom, I was already setting mine in motion. The morning after her girls' weekend, the house felt strange. It wasn't the mess, half-empty Starbucks cups, her heels kicked off by the couch, the faint perfume lingering in the air. It was the absence, not of her, but of something deeper. That invisible thread between us had finally snapped, and I could feel the weight of the quiet pressing against the walls. She came downstairs late, sunglasses on though the blinds were still closed. She said she was tired, that they stayed out too long, laughed too hard. I nodded. Nothing more. She looked at me for a long moment, waiting for questions that never came. Normally I'd ask where they went, who she saw, what time she got in. That used to be our ritual, her confession disguised as conversation. But not anymore. I didn't need details. The mystery suited me now. I'd realized something during that long weekend without her. Peace doesn't always come from understanding. Sometimes it comes from not caring anymore. I started to change things subtly. I canceled the dinner reservations we had for Friday. Said I had work. I didn't. I just didn't want to sit across from someone performing affection out of obligation. I stopped leaving notes on the counter in the mornings, stopped sending the small, drive safe texts she used to take for granted. She didn't mention it at first, but I could see it on her face every time she looked at her phone and found nothing. By Wednesday, she broke the silence. She said she felt like I'd been distant lately. I told her I was just focusing on myself. She smiled, awkward, unsure whether to take it as sarcasm or truth. It was truth. I'd started going to the gym again, staying late at work, grabbing beers with coworkers who barely remembered I was married. It was strange how easily life started expanding once I stopped waiting for her to fill it. That Friday night, she tried to fix it. She came downstairs in a dress she hadn't worn in months, makeup done, pretending everything was normal. She said she thought we could watch a movie together. I told her I already had plans. She froze, just for a second, then laughed like she didn't care. But I saw it. The flicker behind her eyes, the first spark of fear that she wasn't the center anymore. That night, as I drove out of the neighborhood, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The house looked smaller, quieter, like it was finally shrinking back to its true size. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. By the next week, the silence between us had become a living thing. It filled every room, every breath, every glance that used to mean something. She started pacing in it like a trapped animal, trying to break through the walls I'd quietly built. It wasn't loud, it was subtler than that. The kind of shift you can't name, but you feel in your bones. One night, I came home late. The lights were dim, candles lit, a bottle of wine open on the table. She'd cooked dinner, real dinner, not takeout. The kind of effort she hadn't made in months. She smiled when I walked in, soft, practiced, a little too hopeful. She said she just wanted to have a night together, no fighting, no tension. I nodded, sat down, took a sip of the wine, and listened. She talked for a while, about her friends, work, how she missed how easy things used to be. I didn't interrupt. I didn't comfort her. I just listened until her voice cracked around the edges of her own words. When she finally asked if I was still angry, I told her I wasn't angry at all. That was the truth. Anger means you still care enough to burn. I was long past that. Her smile faltered. She said she didn't recognize me anymore. I told her that was the point. Then I stood up, rinsed my plate, and went upstairs. That night, she came into the bedroom quietly, slid into bed beside me, her hand hovering over my arm. For a second, I felt it, the muscle memory of what used to be connection. But it was gone just as quickly. I turned slightly, enough for her to understand without words. Her hand froze, then slowly retreated. The sound of her quiet breathing in the dark was the only apology I ever needed. Over the next few days, she started asking small questions. Who I was texting, where I was going after work. She tried to sound casual, but her voice gave her away. She'd built her confidence on the assumption that I would never stop chasing her. Now she was chasing shadows, trying to find the man she used to control. I started taking longer drives, stopping by a small diner near the edge of town. The waitress there knew my order by the third visit: black coffee, apple pie. She didn't know my story, and I didn't offer it. But I liked how she looked me in the eyes when she spoke. No games. No power. Just presence. Meanwhile, my wife's friends stopped coming around. She stopped posting. The performance was fading. She was finally realizing what I had the night. She said she didn't need permission. She had been fighting for freedom, not realizing that real freedom goes both ways. And I was already living mine. The real shift came 2 weeks later. She started trying to bring back the old rhythm: soft questions, polite smiles, casual touches that used to disarm me. But it was different now. Every move she made felt rehearsed, like she was following a script written for an audience that had already left. I could see it in her eyes. She was searching for the man who used to revolve around her. He wasn't there anymore. One night, she said she wanted to talk. I was sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails on my laptop, a half-empty glass of Jack Daniels beside me. She stood across from me, twisting the ring on her finger, nervous. She said she felt like I'd given up on us. I told her I hadn't given up. I'd just stopped pretending. That hit her harder than I expected. She asked what that meant. I said it meant I'd finally started listening to what she'd been saying all along, even when she thought I wasn't hearing it. She stared at me, like I was someone she couldn't place anymore. Then she said quietly that she missed me. I looked up for a second, met her eyes, and told her I missed peace more. She didn't reply. She just walked out of the room. The next morning, I woke up early, made black coffee, and left before sunrise. I drove until the city lights faded, until the road turned quiet. I ended up at the same diner, the same seat, the same slice of apple pie. The waitress smiled, said she hadn't seen me in a few days. I told her I'd been busy cleaning up the pieces of a life that wasn't mine anymore. She laughed softly, not understanding the weight of it, but somehow it made sense anyway. When I got home, the air felt heavy. She was sitting on the couch, eyes red, mascara smudged, her phone in her lap. She looked up and said she'd gone through my messages. I didn't ask how. I didn't care. She said she didn't find anything, but that wasn't the point. She'd been looking for something to confirm what she already feared. I told her I didn't know her explanations anymore. Her face twisted, and she whispered that I'd changed. She was right. I had. And that terrified her more than anger ever could. Because the version of me she could manipulate, guilt, or charm, that man was gone. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something simple but final. She wasn't losing me anymore. She had already lost me. She was just watching the echo fade. It was strange watching her unravel. She didn't cry the way people do in movies. There were no big scenes, no shouting, no begging. Just quiet confusion, a kind of desperate calm that came from realizing the game was over, and she didn't even notice when it ended. She still tried to play her part. She cooked dinner more often, left little notes by the coffee machine like she used to, wore perfume again. But it all felt like nostalgia performed for someone who'd already left the theater. I didn't reward any of it. I'd nod, say thanks, and go about my day. She started mistaking my politeness for hope, but I knew better. I wasn't being kind. I was being finished. There's a difference. One Friday night, she said she was meeting friends again. Her voice had that careful tone, the one that expected me to react. I didn't. I just said, have fun. The surprise on her face told me she wasn't ready for indifference. When she left, I stayed home, cleaned out the garage, and packed a few boxes of my things, old photos, clothes, tools I hadn't touched in years. I wasn't planning some grand exit. I was just making space. She came back after midnight. I was on the porch, a beer in my hand, the air cold enough to see my breath. She looked startled, maybe even guilty. She said her friends asked about me. I told her to tell them I was doing great. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. She said I was scaring her, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. The next morning, she found the half-empty closet. I hadn't hidden it. She stood there for a while, not saying anything, just staring at the gap where my clothes used to be. Later, she asked if I was leaving her. I said I was already gone. She laughed like it was a joke, but the sound broke halfway through. That weekend, I booked a hotel downtown. I told her it was for work. She didn't believe me, but she didn't stop me either. I left before she woke up, watched the sunrise from the balcony, the city humming quietly beneath me. It didn't feel like freedom yet, but it felt close. Back home, she texted me. One message. 3 words. Come back home. I read it twice, then turned off my phone. Because the truth was simple, home wasn't a place anymore. It was peace, and I'd already found it. I didn't respond to her message that night. I just stared at it for a moment, then let the screen go dark. The silence between us had grown so heavy that even 3 words felt like an echo from another lifetime. She had spent months teaching me how to live without warmth. Now I was simply applying the lesson. At the hotel, life moved differently. No alarms, no tension, just stillness. I'd wake up early, make black coffee from the small Keurig by the window, and watch the city stretch itself awake. I hadn't realized how little peace I'd known until I was surrounded by it. I'd stopped checking my phone entirely, but one morning, I noticed 12 missed calls, all from her. No voicemails, just persistence. The next day, there were fewer, then none. The silence was working both ways now. A week later, she showed up at my office. I saw her before she saw me, standing in the lobby, clutching her coat like it could hold her together. She looked smaller than I remembered. She said she didn't want to fight. She just wanted to understand. I told her understanding wasn't the problem. Respect was. She said she didn't mean for things to go this far. I told her they didn't go anywhere. They just stopped. She asked if there was someone else. I shook my head. There wasn't. There didn't need to be. She didn't understand that peace could replace people. That absence could become enough. That night, she sent another text. Can we start over? I didn't answer. Instead, I drove out of the city to the coast. The water was dark, endless. I sat on the hood of my car, feeling the cold air sting my skin. That sting reminded me I was alive. The next day, I moved the rest of my things out of the house. She wasn't home. I left my key on the counter, the same place she used to leave her phone, her laughter, her indifference. The house looked different in daylight. Smaller, defenseless. I didn't look back. That evening, I went back to the diner near the edge of town. The waitress remembered me. She asked if I wanted the usual. I nodded. When she walked away, I caught my reflection in the window. Tired, maybe, but lighter. I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't even resent her. I just finally stopped needing her to notice I was gone. The first few days after I moved out, she didn't reach out. I think she expected me to cave, to call, to ask how she was doing. That had always been the rhythm between us. She'd pull away, I'd chase. Only this time, there was no chase left in me. The silence wasn't a tactic. It was a truth. I spent my evenings walking along the beach, watching the waves fold over themselves in slow motion. The sound was hypnotic, repetitive but calming, like the world was finally breathing again. Every so often, my phone would light up on the bench beside me. Her name, then another name, mutual friends, asking what happened, if we were working it out. I gave them the same answer every time. There's nothing left to work out. After 2 weeks, she finally broke. She showed up at my door one evening, eyes red, mascara smudged. No makeup could hide the exhaustion. She said she hadn't been sleeping, hadn't been eating. She said she didn't understand how I could walk away so easily. I told her it wasn't easy. It was necessary. There's a difference. She asked if we could go somewhere and talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We ended up at a small cafe near the park. She kept looking at me like I was someone she almost recognized, but couldn't quite name. She said she missed us. I told her she missed control, that she didn't actually want me back. She just wanted her influence back. She tried to deny it, but tears cut her sentence in half. We sat in silence after that. The sound of clinking glasses, soft conversations, distant music, everything in that cafe felt more alive than the space between us. When the check came, I paid. She looked at me like she wanted to say something, but all that came out was, "So this is it then?" I said, "It's been it for a long time. We just didn't admit it." When I stood up, she didn't follow. I walked out, leaving her sitting there, staring at the table like it held an answer she'd missed. Outside, the air smelled like rain. I remember looking up at the sky and realizing something simple. Closure isn't about who apologizes first. It's about who stops needing to. As I drove away, I didn't feel the rush of freedom or the sting of loss. Just quiet balance. The kind of silence that finally means peace, not punishment. It had been a month since that last conversation in the cafe. The calls stopped. The messages faded. Even the mutual friends went silent. It was like she'd finally accepted it. Or maybe she was just exhausted from trying to break through a wall that wasn't built for her anymore. Either way, the quiet that followed was absolute. And for the first time in years, I could breathe without waiting for the next emotional shift, the next argument disguised as love. I settled into a new rhythm. Work, gym, late-night drives. The world felt larger, like I'd been living in a cage I hadn't noticed until the door opened. One night after work, I stopped by the diner again. The same booth, the same waitress, the same black coffee and slice of pie. She asked if I was a writer or something because I always seemed deep in thought. I told her no, I was just someone who finally learned to enjoy silence. She laughed and said most people run from it. I said most people run from themselves. Later that week, I got an email from her. Just a single line, "I hope you're okay." It didn't sound manipulative, not like before. It sounded empty. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't owe her my peace anymore. I'd spent too long trading it for validation that never came. She used to say she wanted honesty. I finally gave it to her, in the form of disappearance. Still, sometimes at night, I'd catch flashes of memory, her laughter, her voice echoing down the hallway, the smell of her perfume. But they didn't hurt anymore. They were like old photographs, moments you can look at without wanting to return. That's how I knew I was healed. A few weeks later, I heard through someone else that she had moved to another city. Fresh start, they said. I nodded, smiled faintly. Everyone deserves one. She'd get her clean slate, and I'd keep my silence. That weekend, I drove to the coast again. The sun was setting low, the sky burning orange and violet over the water. I stood there for a long time, watching the waves erase footprints one by one. It felt symbolic, everything temporary, everything eventually washed clean. And in that moment, I realized something she never did. Freedom isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's quiet, patient, and complete. Just like walking away, without anger, without noise, and never looking back. Months passed before I heard her name again. A coworker mentioned she'd seen her downtown, sitting alone at a cafe. Same one we used to go to. She said she looked different, thinner, quieter, like someone living in the shadow of her own story. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. The image was enough. People always imagine heartbreak as chaos, but the truth is quieter. It's in the way someone looks at an empty chair and pretends it doesn't hurt. That night, I went for a long drive. The streets were empty, the city painted in amber streetlight. I stopped at a red light and caught my reflection in the windshield. I didn't recognize the man staring back, but not in a bad way. He looked older, calmer, lighter. There was no weight in his eyes anymore, no trace of the constant waiting that used to define him. She'd once told me I was too steady, that my calm made her feel restless. I guess now she'd gotten what she wanted. Permanent stillness, just not the kind she expected. One evening, I got a letter. Handwritten. The envelope smelled faintly like her perfume. My first instinct was to throw it away, but something stopped me. I opened it slowly, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. Her handwriting was the same, neat, controlled, every line a small attempt at grace. She said she understood now. She said she finally knew what it felt like to be unheard, unseen, taken for granted. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg for another chance. She just said she hoped I'd found peace. I folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. She had finally learned the lesson I had once begged her to understand. But by the time she did, the classroom was empty. That's how it always goes. People realize your worth only after your absence becomes the loudest thing in their life. Later that night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, the city buzzing faintly below. I poured myself a drink, watched the sky fade into quiet darkness, and thought about how endings rarely announce themselves. They don't arrive with tears or slamming doors. Sometimes they show up as stillness, the kind you mistake for loneliness until you realize it's actually freedom. And that freedom? It doesn't echo. It simply exists. Like peace, unshakable and final. I never answered her letter. Not because of pride, not because of anger, because there was nothing left inside me that needed to respond. It was strange, realizing how something that once defined my days now carried no weight at all. I kept that letter, though, not as a token of nostalgia, but as proof that people always return to the silence they created. She had written words she should have said years ago, and I could feel the sincerity in them. But sincerity comes too late, when time has already erased the space where it belonged. Life moved forward quietly. I found a new place, small, simple, near the ocean. The mornings smelled like salt and coffee, and the only sound was the waves tapping the shore. I bought an old record player and started collecting vinyls, things I never had time for before. There was something beautiful about the imperfection of a record's crackle, the way it reminded me that even flaws could sound peaceful when you learned to stop resisting them. Sometimes I'd think of her, not with longing, just curiosity. I'd wonder if she ever walked past that cafe again, if she still checked her phone at night, waiting for messages that would never come. Maybe she found someone new. Maybe she finally became the person she used to pretend to be, free, fearless, untouchable. Or maybe she learned that freedom without gratitude feels a lot like emptiness. One evening, I walked down to the water as the sun was setting. The horizon looked endless, and for the first time in my life, so did I. I remembered that night months ago when she said, "I don't need permission." And I smiled, not bitterly, but with understanding. She was right. She never needed permission. But neither did I. As I stood there, the wind picked up, cool and sharp against my face. I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't even wish things had gone differently. Every version of her, every silence, every small betrayal, it all led me here. To peace, to clarity, to the quiet strength that comes only after you've lost everything you thought you couldn't live without. People think disappearing is about running away, but it's not. It's about returning to yourself, to the truth, to the stillness that never asked for anyone's approval. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. And that, finally, was enough.